Welcome back to Outside Views, and today we have to talk about a political project that was sold on a prospectus of unbridled national prosperity, only to deliver a decade of quantifiable, self-inflicted economic disaster. And the headline I'm looking at is stark. New study reveals Brexit catastrophe. And this is not a hyperbole, it's the calculated empirical truth now laid bare by serious economists who have done the math on the cost of the UK's departure from the European Union. My personal view on this is that Brexit was and remains a terrible mistake, and this new study is the final brutal accounting of that folly. It's the bill that the political establishment never wanted the public to see. The data released by these renowned economists confirms our worst fears. Barely a decade after the referendum, the UK economy has been demonstrably shrunk by up to 8% and has seen 1/6 of its foreign investment scared away. And this is not a temporary blip, a slight adjustment, or a short-term trading difficulty. This is structural, permanent damage to the foundational economic engine of the nation, and it was entirely avoidable. The study paints a devastating picture of the forces that have poisoned the economic environment in the UK. It identifies a toxic mix of factors that are poison for any economy. Increased uncertainty, diminished demand, time wasted on new bureaucracy, and the misallocation of economic resources. And let's break down what each of those poisons means for the real economy and for businesses and for ordinary citizens. The first, increased uncertainty, is the direct consequence of the prolonged political chaos that defined the Brexit process. From the referendum itself to the negotiation of the Trade and Cooperation Agreement and the subsequent years of wrangling over the Northern Ireland Protocol, businesses have operated under a constant cloud of political risk. Uncertainty is the single greatest deterrent to business investment. When companies cannot predict the long-term regulatory environment, the cost of moving goods, or the availability of labor, they do one thing. They stop investing. They postpone building new factories, delay hiring, and choose to divert their capital to more stable markets, like the European Union. And this study confirms that the cumulative effect of this political instability has been to scare away 1/6 of investments. And investment is the engine of productivity, and without it, an economy simply cannot grow faster, which directly translates to stagnant wages and lower living standards for everyone. And the second factor, diminished demand, is the reality of being outside the world's largest single market. The friction introduced by the new customs checks, the rule of origin requirements, and regulatory divergence acts as a direct non-tariff barrier. And this barrier makes goods from the UK more expensive and harder to sell into the EU, and it makes goods from the EU more complex to import. The cost of trade goes up and the volume of trade goes down. And this directly leads to a lower overall demand for British goods and services from its biggest neighbour, shrinking the market accessible to UK businesses. And this lack of demand discourages businesses from scaling up, from innovating and from specializing, leading to slower growth and fewer opportunities. And the third factor, the time wasted on new bureaucracy, is the hidden killer of productivity for small and medium-sized enterprises, the so-called SMEs. The UK left the single market to escape bureaucracy, but what it gained was a crippling mountain of entirely new self-imposed paperwork. New only for the UK, because they created that while they were a member of the EU themselves as well. And customs declarations, safety certifications, health certificates, and compliance checks now absorb countless hours of administrative time that used to be spent on innovation, production, or customer service. And the study quantifies this lost time as a significant drag on productivity. For an SME that cannot afford to hire dedicated customs agents, the choice is often simply to stop exporting to the EU altogether, thereby cutting off their access to their largest potential market. And this loss of efficiency and specialization is a guaranteed route to a permanently poorer nation. And the most shocking headline figure, the economy having shrunk by up to 8% after only a decade, is the aggregate of all these poisons. 8% of GDP is an astronomical, truly staggering loss. To put that into context, 8% is roughly equivalent to the entire size of the construction sector or the entire output of the financial services sector. It means that compared to a scenario where the UK remained in the EU, the country is permanently and measurably poorer by an amount equivalent to losing an entire major industry. The promises of the Brexit campaign, the massive dividends, the simplified trading, the global opportunities, have been utterly crushed by this one devastating number. And there's simply no conceivable new trade deal with the US, Australia, or any combination of distant countries that could ever hope to offset a loss of this magnitude from trade with the immediate neighbor and largest partner. The entire project has been an act of economic self-harm on an epic scale, driven by ideologic purity rather than rational calculation. And the study serves as a necessary, inconvenient truth delivered right at a time when the political class desperately wants to move on and pretend the question of Brexit's economic cost is settled or irrelevant. It is neither. The consequences are not theoretical. They are visible in the stagnant wages, the high inflation, the shortages, and the chronic underinvestment plaguing the economy. The government is already having to wrestle with a massive fiscal black hole, a hole that is directly caused by a less productive, less wealthy economy that generates billions less in tax revenue. And this new study confirms that the only way to fill that hole is through politically toxic measures like raising income tax or cutting essential public services, punishing the very citizens who were promised a dividend. And this research must completely reframe the debate around the UK's future. You cannot just accept the permanent damage of an 8% smaller economy as the new normal. The government must stop pretending that the current relationship with the EU is the best they can achieve, or with a little reset. And the fact that this self-imposed disaster has been allowed to fester for a decade is a scandal of political negligence. The only logical and responsible path forward, the only way to mitigate this immense structural damage, is to begin the slow, painful process of rebuilding closer economic ties with the EU. This does not mean rejoining, because that wouldn't even be possible at the moment, but it means seeking out every available opportunity to reduce the friction, to realign regulatory standards, and to re-establish participation in the systems that the UK's economy was built on. Every hour spent on a spurious trade deal with a minor partner, every piece of legislation passed purely for the sake of regulatory divergence, is simply deepening the hole dug by the original mistake. The time for denial is over. The economic case against Brexit is now quantified, devastating, and undeniable. And the 8% figure is a permanent anchor holding back the prosperity of the entire nation. And until that anchor is lifted, the UK will continue to drift away from the successful, vibrant economies of its neighbours. And this study reveals a true national catastrophe, one that must finally force a moment of rational reckoning, putting economic recovery ahead of ideological pride. And if you want to know more, the next video is right here in the end screen.